Joining me now to discuss the week in politics from Melbourne is Michael Kroger. Michael, welcome back. And firstly,
Catherine,
how are you
great to be here.
down there? This must be demoralising to all Victorians to be back where you were.
Yes, I think that's true. I think the demoralising thing, quite frankly, is that unlike Berejiklian, who quarantines the state to the hotspot areas, the Victorian government historically closes down the whole state. So people hundreds of miles away where there's no coronavirus are stuck at home for no reason. That's the really demoralising part about it. Shocking management, basically.
Well, Twitter is almost invariably always wrong, but even this time I've noticed a loss of enthusiasm for Andrews. There's not so much of the I stand with Dan hashtag around today. What's the ground reality there? Do you sense that there might be a sense that... I'm just curious that the Twitterati are blaming Morrison for this as usual. What's your sense? I've got a feeling that some of the ardour of Victorians has cooled a bit for the government.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. By the way, I think you should get off Twitter and stop reading it because, it's the Green Left Weekly of the technology era, isn't it? So I'm not on Twitter. I don't take any notice of it. It's just a left-wing echo chamber. I mean, what small business person's got time to be on Twitter? What restaurateur or childcare operator or, hospitality worker or owner has got time to be on Twitter all day long? It's left-wing academics, journalists, public servants, trade unionists. Hardly anyone in the small business community would be on Twitter actively, so I don't take any notice of it. But has the government support cooled? It has, as the anger amongst particularly people in the restaurant, catering, hospitality, cafe sectors. I mean, this sector employs 200,000 Australians and they stop, start. So many small businesses have been destroyed, cafes closed up, and you can't open a big cafe selling $4 coffees and make any money. It's just destroying these businesses. And down here, it basically just shows the incompetence of a Labor government when dealing with business. I mean, that lead foot, the lead foot approach. But of course, no public servants affected. They're all getting their pay. All the politicians getting their pay. Building workers, by the way, can still work. And the good news is bottle shops are open because they're considered an essential service, but you can't have funerals.
Yes. And look, you're legally trained, Michael, and I want to put this to rest once and for all because we keep hearing this allegation about quarantine being a Commonwealth responsibility. Now, it has a head of power under 51(9), but it has not legislated to cover the field in this instance, as I understand it, because of the consensus arrived at with the state premiers who chose to exercise their plenary power over policing and medicine to operate this. Now, is that a fair assessment? This constant mantra that PBO and others are running, he's elected not to cover the field at the specific request of the states.
That's exactly how I understand it, and therefore the reversionary right of the states to administer quarantine is what has been happening with basically no objection, by the way, from the feds and no objection by the states. Until now, until recently, the states have been saying, well, of course, these hotels were never set up for quarantine purposes. But this has been a consensus, and by and large, quite frankly, it's worked incredibly well. The federal government have kept the borders shut. They've done a very good job in getting vaccines into this country. And, before people say, oh, but hang on, we've had a shortage and a slower rollout. There are 200 countries around the world trying to buy these vaccines. And nearly every one of those countries, if not all of them, have got far more serious problems than we have in Australia, where we've got, I think now in Victoria, 30 and none in the rest of the country. India, as we know, with 300,000 to 400,000 new cases a day. We've had 4 in Australia, 4 overnight, 26 in the last few days. So people, and I make this point to the Greens and others, don't be so selfish. The countries that need these vaccines far more than we do should be getting them. And in a sense, the EU were right, weren't they, to say, well, look, Australia, you don't really need more AstraZeneca at the minute, and they cut the supply to us, as you know. There are, if we are world citizens, as Bob Brown used to tell us we were, well, I'd say to those people, spare a thought for countries in far greater need than we are here, quite frankly. Spare a thought for fellow human beings who are dying at huge rates.
Indeed. And I've been actually in touch with coach of India, Ravi Shastri, overnight, who's a mate of mine. It was his birthday. And it's chilling what's going on in that nation. And the same people who don't believe in open borders within Australia want the international border opened, of course, so that paradox is not lost.
Yeah.
Michael, look, one of the themes you and I have revisited right through this year, and you've overheard what I had to say with Bridget McKenzie. The National Party's drawing, I think, justifiable confidence out of the state result in Upper Hunter. I personally do think it's got national ramifications, so I'd be curious to hear your view on that. But secondly, this mantra that we're hearing from some in the core constituency of the coalition, that still running this line that Morrison's a fake, Frydenberg's a pragmatist, they're not ideological enough for some. It comes down to this, does it not? You can either have him or you can have Albo. It really is that simple. And yet this bin fire on the right of the Conservative movement continues when we've come through this about as well as any nation on earth. Curious to hear what you make of the general state of play and the standing of the PM and likelihood of the term.
Well, as to the first issue, this was as close to a federal by-election as I've ever seen in my life, and we all know why it was fought on the issue of energy. So this by-election had its origins, believe it or not, way back in 1967 when Whitlam took over from Cornwall, and you saw the university legally trained Whitlam take over from the working class Arthur Cornwall, who never went to university. And Labor have fought this class war within itself between the new class and the old class since 1967, where they paused during the Hawke-Keating era, where they were brilliant enough to bring Labor together. Albo's not able to do that and never will be able to. He's part of the old left who's trying to be part of the new left. And you've now got the battle between, and the battle's got worse, Catherine. It was and is between Labor's working class traditional base and the new class. But the new class are no longer just the university educated and public servants. They're now a whole raft of people threatening the working class base. They include, venture capitalists, big tech entrepreneurs, climate change zealots, renewable energy rent seekers, electric car supporters. And basically Labor these days, I can define, the slogan should be Labor, leaving you behind, because that's what's happening here. And Malcolm Turnbull ran into a bit of this trouble in 2016 in the campaign, where he gave brilliant speeches to inner city internet, workshops, where he was brilliant talking about the cloud and changes in technology, which every one time he did one of those, he was brilliant, but it alienated working class people. So Labor are getting further away from the working class base, and that was very evident in this by-election. And Fitzgibbon's on the right track and always has been. Albo's on the... Albo just... look, the truth is Albo doesn't know whether he's Arthur or Martha, and that's the trouble for Labor. And the electorate won't support someone who doesn't know where they stand. At least they know where Fitzgibbon stands. He'd be a bigger chance of them winning because he's got an authenticity that we thought Albo had. As to your second point, look, Scott is a pragmatic conservative. He is in many ways what John Howard was. It's important to make sure you implement what works. What works? Morrison was great on borders as immigration minister. He was strong as treasurer. In a global pandemic, the like of which we've never, ever seen before, and I say to my kids, lap it up, because you'll probably never see anything like this again, and you can tell your kids about it. Morrison has broken the shackles of what we traditionally, and a lot of Liberals don't like this, think of the way the governments act, but they've done it to protect jobs and protect the Australian economy and protect our base, who are small business men and women who were being destroyed by this. You could have had a disastrous return out of COVID with this country effectively with its economy destroyed, or you could recover in the way we have. Now, OK, we fully acknowledge the debt, but Morrison and Frydenberg are hard on growth being the way to pay off the debt over the next decade or so. Inflation is obviously going to help, but in the end they had no choice. The other things I'd say is, let's look at their other issues. Are they pro-Israel? Very much so, particularly Josh, for obvious reasons. Are they pro our traditional alliances with America? Yes. Are they strong in relation to China? Yes. So in terms of foreign policy fields, they are absolutely in the grand tradition of the Liberal Party. And Morrison, of course, is a committed public Pentecostal Christian. Well, if that's not a testimony to his conservative credentials, I'm not sure what is.
Well, that's a pretty sound basis, I think, to probably run for the next election whenever he calls it. Michael Kroger, thank you for your time on the McGregor Angle. We'll talk again.
Great pleasure.
All the best. Have a great weekend.
Cheers.
Stay safe.
Great pleasure.